McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise in support of this amendment. Mr. President, we have all individually, together, in private conversations and before the public, talked about how dire our circumstances is and how difficult the decisions are and are going to be that we have to make. We all are here to address a budget deficit which, as it is formally before us, we all know is much less than what the real deficit is going to be once it is certified by OFA and OPM, and that we may have to get to about $1 billion to balance our budget, as is our constitutional obligation, by July 1st. So as there were some discussions and some disagreements as to what was in the deficit mitigation package, I have to admit that I, for one, never anticipated we would have new spending increases in the package. I really honestly never saw this one coming. We are putting into the deficit mitigation package at a time when we are looking at the largest budget deficit, a larger budget deficit than anyone in this circle has ever dealt with, new spending increases. $274,000 in this year, but I think $1.2 million next year. Does that make any sense to anybody? Does that make any sense to anybody? It doesn't make any sense to me. And then I look at the process and the policy of this, and I am even more troubled. And this has nothing to do with the fact that the people who were trying to help, the janitors, should have health care coverage. They came and complained and petitioned and talked to us in the legislature last year. Nothing was done about it. Probably could have been done at a time when we didn't know we were going to have as much of a hole as we have. But I've learned a lot about the standard wage statute and what's going on with this. So let me just inform my colleagues some of the minutia, because I think it's something we should be very concerned about. There were 3 best qualified bidders for this contract for the state legislative office buildings. One Source Company was the low bidder at $2.4+ million, was the prior contractor for the legislature, and because of management problems was not picked. The second lowest bidder was The Guardian, which got the bid, which had a bid of 5.8% lower than the third qualified bidder, of about $145,000 difference, which was CSI International at $2.6 million. These are private companies who, under our law, have to set aside a minimum of 30% to pay for benefits for these employees. Not health care benefits, all benefits. I do not know, because we've not had a public hearing, what percentage of that 30% they set aside go to health care benefits versus other benefits. I don't know. Maybe they're putting the entire 30% towards health care benefits and it still can't pay for it. That would be a consideration. I also know that the statute provides for setting aside 30% as a minimum. It doesn't prohibit them from putting aside more, which obviously they've chosen not to do. There's been a representation that, well, if these people go on Husky A, it'll cost the state more. I don't know if all of them are eligible or not. We don't know how many are eligible because we haven't had a public hearing to get those figures out as well. Here's what I don't know. I don't know what the president of Guardian makes for a salary. I don't know who he or she is. I don't know what their managers make. I don't know if he took a bonus of $1 million or not. I have no idea who they are. But it's a private company which the taxpayers of the state of Connecticut are now giving money to directly to help defray health care costs that they were supposed to pay for under their contract that they were awarded from the state of Connecticut. Maybe the third higher bidder, who was $145,000 more, was higher because they had a better understanding of what the real health care costs were and put that in their bid. So we're going to bail out Guardian because they won't fulfill their statutory obligations and their moral obligations to do what's right. And the taxpayers are paying for it. Universal health care, here we come, baby. That's not hyperbole, because that's what this is. The taxpayers of the state of Connecticut are asked to pay a private company to defray health care costs at a time when we have the largest budget deficit in our state's history. And we didn't have a public hearing on it. None of that makes sense. And at the end of the day, you know what? Every single one of those people should have health care. I totally agree. I even went to some of the union representatives and said, have you checked out, and I had my staff research, could this 600 group buy into Mega MIHIP? No, they can't. Could they buy into the state pool? No, they can't. Why not? Because they work for a private company. So who's this money going to? It's going to the private company. Maybe it ends up in the trust that's established under the process to do it. But that is the mechanics of what we're doing. We have people who do an important service, who are low-wage jobs, no doubt about it, who deserve health care. But we have a private company that bid with the state of Connecticut and was awarded a contract. I think the amendment before us that I would love to work on with the majority should be that in the future, when people who are subject to the standard wage law can't fulfill their obligations, their contract is put out to bid. Because God knows there are a lot of companies who would, I think, bid. We'd see a lot more bids and a lot lower price because they'd be willing to make less profits as a corporate business to have any profits at all. So I understand the desire and the need to provide health care coverage for these people because they should have it. The obligation belongs to the private companies who bid for contracts and were awarded contracts to the state of Connecticut, and they're not doing it. And we don't know any of the facts as to why they're not. We don't know what kind of profits they make or not. So I just think we move too fast on this. It sends the wrong message that we're really not here to cut spending. It may be the right result at the end of the day, but this is a terribly wrong way to go about doing it, as I understand all of the facts that I've learned from our staff and our attorneys about the standard wage law and the bids that were given on these contracts. A $2.5 million bid alone just for the legislative building that went to a private company, and that apparently is not enough money for them to provide the health care for their employees. Thank you, Mr. President. I would urge adoption of this amendment.
Thank you, Senator McKinney.